I'm Erwin Raphael McManus, and this is the Genius of Podcast. And today I have a really special guest. Her name is Angela Manuel Davis, and Angela is the co-founder of Army Fitness Studio. She became known across the world for being the trainer for people like Jay-Z, Beyonce. She also was featured by Oprah, and she was on the movie I Feel Pretty with Amy Schumer. Angela's a personal friend, and I've watched her as she began this new company, and I know her life story will be so inspiring to you. So join me today as we unwrap the genius of Angela Manuel Davis. Angela, it's so good to have you. I am so excited to have this conversation. A lot of people don't know, but we're really close friends.
We are.
Our families do life together. We have had so many great experiences, great memories, and I love your husband, Jerome. He is, I'm going to say this, he's an incredibly handsome man.
He's very handsome. I will agree with you.
But he's also a gentleman. He's gracious.
Yes.
He's tender, he's kind,
Yes.
intelligent, creative, and you have two amazing boys, Edward and Lorenzo. And my son Aaron and my daughter Mariah love your boys. And in fact, every time Aaron sees Lorenzo or Edward, he's like, these guys are just so incredible.
Thank you.
So you've done a great job as a mom.
I appreciate you. And I love your family, and your family has become my family. So thank you for that.
And it's in the context of all that, because a lot of times people only see one particular expression of a person's talents or genius.
Yeah.
And I can sit here and I get the benefit of having watched your life in every dimension, as a wife, as a mom, as an entrepreneur, as a motivator, as an actress.
Hey.
and to see that talent. Not just expressed at such a high level, but in the context of so much integrity and so much character.
That means a lot.
And so I just can't wait for people to get to know you a little better.
Aww.
And so thank you so much for joining me. I know you would never call yourself a genius.
No.
But I'm calling you one, and this episode is the genius of Angela Davis.
Thank you.
Your whole family is so creative, so talented, so inventive. And there's genius that just oozes all over your family.
Thank you.
But what people don't realize is that you have such extraordinary genius in you that goes so far beyond your athletic background. And so what I want us to do is I just want to talk to you not only about what made you a world-class athlete, but I want to talk about what's helped you even as you face different struggles in your life, and what has formed you into the person that you are. Because every superhero has an origin story.
Amen.
And I want you to share with all of us your origin story.
You know, the word genius is kind of hard for me, by the way.
I know, and normal? You're not calling yourself a genius.
No, but is that like, that's not like a thing that...
That's why I love doing this, because you see, if you called yourself a genius, it would seem pretty narcissistic.
Yes.
But you're not calling yourself a genius. I'm calling you a genius.
I know, and I even felt weird, like acknowledging that you were saying that. As you were saying that, it made me cringe a little bit. So I'm just going to receive your kindness in this moment.
Well, it's not kindness, it's clarity. and I want to go to the beginning. Tell us a little bit about where you were born, the environment in which you were raised. Tell us a little bit about your family.
Yeah.
What shaped you in your early years?
I think what shaped me in my early years is being the oldest of four, coming from an athletic family where spirituality was at the root of everything that we did. You know, everything that really made us who we are. My mom and dad were high school sweethearts. They started dating when my mom was 15.
Wow.
My dad was drafted out of high school to play pro ball, and they got married.
Baseball.
And they got married, you know, my mom was 18, they got married, and immediately, you know, had me not long after. I think I was born maybe 9 months, a year later. And, being the oldest of 4 and coming from a close-knit family, it's almost like being an Army brat when your dad plays pro ball, because you're living in the city that he's, out of, but you're traveling all over at the same time. And it was just us.
So what was the first city that you considered home?
I think I was born in Evansville, Indiana, but I think home for me, the first city was Sacramento, where my parents, that's where their families are from, and that's where they went to school, high school, and where they met. Sacramento was considered the first city that was home. And then when I was in 7th grade, we moved to Florida. We moved to West Palm Beach, Florida.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's quite a change from the Midwest to the West Coast to the East Coast.
Yeah. So from Sacramento to West Palm Beach, then I went to college from Florida to Tulsa, Oklahoma. I went to Oral Roberts University.
Wow.
After I graduated Oral Roberts University, I moved to Chicago, where my dad was managing the Chicago White Sox. And from Chicago, I ended up in Los Angeles.
So your dad is managing baseball.
Yeah.
And before he was a professional player.
He was a professional player first, and then he, got into coaching and managing.
And that's a pretty brutal occupation, because you're completely measured on your wins and losses.
Absolutely.
And how did that affect you growing up? Did it affect you when your dad was in, let's say, if the White Sox were in a losing streak, which would be expected?
Yeah.
How did
they
it
went to the
affect you?
playoffs in 2000.
All right,
and
that's
he was
awesome.
manager of the year in 2000.
That's amazing.
And then the following year, he got fired because they didn't go further. And then the next year, they won the World Series.
Oh my goodness.
So he did move them to greatness.
And he actually gave them the material from which they became the best in the world.
Absolutely.
So what's it like growing up in home where your dad is completely affected by the wins and the losses, the W and L's? Did that shape you in some way?
Well, there was a time where he was moved by it. Mm-hmm. There was a time where he would drive to the stadium every day and he would listen to sports radio. He would, wake up in the morning and read the paper and the sports section. And so he would constantly hear and see so many people's opinions.
Right.
And he learned from that quickly. He learned that that was not in his best interest to do that. And so I believe when I was finally of age to actually receive, he did teach me not to ever believe the good or the bad, not to ever really listen to the good or the bad. He would say that there were times where he would be managing and he would be so into the game that he would just reach down and touch the sand and bring himself into the moment. He would be so somewhere else and he just needed to come back to reality. And so he learned from that. And I think that has helped me in my life and in my career not to be so concerned about what everyone else had to say.
Wow.
Because when I decided to do what I do the way that I do it, which hadn't been done before, if I would have listened to everyone's opinions about it, I don't know that I would have stayed the course. And so that was something that he learned from that. He learned that he couldn't be too excited about the hype, and then he couldn't be too down about the discouragement.
Yeah, it must be such a challenging thing, even emotionally, to go from manager of the year and then to be removed.
That's right.
And so you realize that even being the best in your industry doesn't guarantee you any security or stability.
No.
It's one of the few professions, and that's why I brought that up, was that it seems to me that being a baseball manager is so fragile, so tenuous. You can be great, but the memory of the people that you worked for is very short.
Yeah, it's true.
And so you're almost only as good as that next season.
That's right. It's so true.
And so you don't become manager of the year if you don't have a deep drive to be competitive and be the best.
Yeah.
Did you feel like you were expected to be the best?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We didn't we didn't play for second. We didn't play for mediocrity. Mm-hmm. We didn't play for average. But my parents were so good at encouraging us. They were so good at holding the space for us to be our best. They had such a sweet way of doing that and pulling that out of us to the point where you wanted to do good for them. Like you wanted to show out for them. You wanted, to have, for me as a track and field athlete, I wanted to have the best race, because they were there. And, I think it's special. I also think that what my dad taught me through managing and coaching professional baseball is he would always say to me, what is most important is not that I am coaching and managing these Hall of Fame athletes, these extraordinary athletes, but what he would always say to me is, it is just as important for the man to be just as great as the athlete, for the father to be just as great as the athlete, for the husband to be just as great as the athlete, for the son, like it was in totality what he was doing, which I thought was so beautiful. There was such a wholeness to what he was doing.
That's so beautiful. Yeah, I think it's easy to forget that you did not see him as a great manager. You saw him as a great father.
That's right.
And being a great manager was an aside to who he was as a human being.
Yeah, and I mean, to be honest with you, like, I couldn't tell you whether or not if he was a great manager. You're right. Like, he was a great dad. Like, I don't know the logistics, or I don't know. I assume he was. I heard he was. He was manager of the year. You know what I mean? Like, he was so dope. But yeah, you're right. Like, he was just such a good man and such a good father that I knew, and he always operated in the spirit of excellence, and he really cared about people and had this humanity about him where I can't help but believe he was one of the best to ever do it.
That's so good. So how did you end up in track? How did you pick that as a way you would express your own sense of greatness, competition?
Yeah. I was always the fastest until I got to, I think it was middle school, where a boy could finally beat me.
So you didn't pick speed picked you.
Speed picked me. Speed picked me. But it wasn't until my senior year in high school where I decided I will pursue track and not soccer, because I started soccer at 5 years old. And I was really good in soccer. I had 51 goals my junior year. I was ranked in the nation. And I loved soccer until my senior year in high school. For whatever reason, I just kind of lost the love. I kind of fell out of love. And track and field I just began to love it more than soccer. I mean, I think up until that point, I didn't know what I was going to choose. I didn't know if I was going to go to school on a track scholarship. I didn't know if I was going to go to school on a soccer scholarship. I didn't know which direction I was going to go, because I was equally, as talented in both. But I just kind of lost the love for soccer. And I don't know if
that just breaks my heart.
I know. But now I have a soccer stud son, so I love it again.
You passed it on.
I did.
To him.
I did.
And so obviously, a lot of times people think, how did you end up doing something? There was natural talent there.
Yeah.
And but natural talent only takes you so far.
That's right.
Because once you start competing at different levels, everyone's talented.
That's right.
What were some of the disciplines or patterns that you had to take on to begin to harness that talent and activate it to your highest level?
I didn't begin to harness it or activate it until college, because you're right. Like, I could just get away with being more talented than everyone else. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't that hard of a worker. I was just super, super talented, if I'm being really honest. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't until college where I realized, everybody's fast. Yeah. Everybody's good. And it became a different sense of responsibility. It became it became a different investment that I knew I needed to make in myself and what God had given me. it felt different. It hit different when I was in college, and it mattered. And I knew I could no longer get by on being talented. I knew that my hard work needed to push me to the next level. And so it wasn't until then where I started to put the work in. But some of the principles that I used, I think I was really big in visualizing. I think I was really big in being mindful of the words that I spoke. I think I held on to things that I saw for my life, and really believed that if I could see it, I could be it. And I became almost unstoppable in my mind before my body showed up to it.
Wow.
And so for me, the mental strength had to, really kicked in, and that was something that I was really, I stayed mindful. I stayed mindful of my thoughts. I stayed mindful of my words. I made sure that my actions and everything I did matched what I saw for my life.
Now, was this a calibration where you just began realizing I perform better when I'm like this, or was it something you were coached and mentored about?
That's a good question. I mean, growing up, in the household I grew up in, we were always reminded of that scripture of life and death being in the power of the tongue. So we were always mindful of our words. Always, always, always.
So you took a concept from the Bible and applied it to track.
I did.
That's genius.
I did.
By the way. Now, what about, you were saying you really began to visualize your excellence, visualize your victories.
Yeah.
How did that start?
I remember probably, again, college, but I remember being in the Olympic trials in 2000, and I was on the line in the prelims against Marion Jones running the 100 meters. And I remember being in the starting blocks in that race against the fastest woman in the world. And I remember looking down the finish line and seeing myself cross the line in first. I remember seeing myself victorious. I remember adopting that victory before the race had even begun.
That's so good.
And I didn't win, but I qualified for the semifinals. I think I got second or third in that race. But that was the first race that I was completely in my flow, and that was the first race where I don't even remember the race. I just remember all of a sudden I crossed the finish line, and then I had reporters asking me how I felt about moving on, not even realizing that
what you had just accomplished.
Not even realizing it.
Wow.
And so the power of visualization became real to me in a different way. And I can bring it back to a specific time of that moment, but I'm sure it was something I was practicing, but I remember that moment feeling like that principle was in action.
All right, so I think this is a really important principle, visualizing.
Yeah.
And almost like creating inside of yourself the narrative of what you're going to accomplish so that your body actually follows your belief.
Yeah.
But there's also like a downside to that, because that means you're highly imaginative. It means that you have trained yourself to project into the future. Have you ever found yourself, and I'm going to fast forward a little bit going, have you ever found yourself in a moment of crisis where you begin to see yourself projecting the most negative futures, and then you have to begin to fight for what future you're going to choose? Absolutely.
1000%. It's a constant. It's that choice is constant. That fight is constant. The battle for peace, the battle for staying in a place of surrender, the battle of, of having uncertainty, experiencing uncertainty, and I believe it was a message that you spoke on a while back, but still being able to have this confidence in uncertainty. I mean, it's a constant battle. I'm in a season in my life right now where there's a lot of uncertainty, and it is very easy for me to imagine the worst case scenario, but I absolutely cannot allow myself to go there.
Have you ever noticed that it doesn't take any intention to project a negative future, but it takes an incredible amount of intention to project a positive future?
It does.
And so
so much work. There's so much fight to create space for that. There's so much to fight off to make sure it stands and it stays. There's so much work to hold on to that. There's so much more than negative.
And I love the fact that in that race, you talked about visualizing yourself winning. And then you said, well, I didn't win, I qualified.
Yeah.
But that didn't change the power of what happened.
No way.
Because what actually resulted it wasn't about who was running against you or who you're running against. It was about you executing your highest level of greatness.
There it is.
And
that is the win.
Yeah, that's right.
That is the win.
That's right, because you knew when you finished that you had just accomplished something that was unique to you.
That's right.
I think sometimes people miss it. They think, oh, what's the point of visualizing something or believing something or seeing it if it doesn't happen exactly the way I saw it? But really the end game is to free yourself of all the negative, in a sense, energy that will keep you from achieving your highest level.
That's right.
And so apply that right now. You learn that early on, and talk to us about. I find sometimes transitions are the hardest times.
Yeah.
When you had a moment of great success and then you have a moment of great failure. Your dad becomes manager of the year, then he loses his job.
That's right.
It's so easy to be, in a sense, in a flow when things are going well.
That's right.
It's so much more challenging when there's so much turbulence and uncertainty in life.
Yeah.
And what are some of the things you do when you realize, oh, wait a minute, I've just lost some of my focus, or I've lost some of the intention that allows me to imagine the future I want to create? What are some of the steps you do to get yourself back there?
Well, once I catch myself, I remind myself that I'm not a victim, that I'm victorious. I remind myself that life isn't happening to me, but for me. I remind myself that there's not one obstacle that I cannot overcome, that there's not one challenge. I remind myself who I am and whose I am. It's important for me to always remind myself that I'm a child of God. And with that, knowing that I'm a child of God, I know things aren't happening to me just to happen to me. I don't believe that I go through hardship or heartache in vain, just for the sake of going through hardship and heartache. I truly believe that if there is a challenge that I'm to go to, that the only way that I can get to where I need to go is through the challenge. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with the hard. I'm okay with going through the hard because I know I'm worthy of the version of myself that's on the other side of the hard.
Is there any way you can say that again?
I don't know.
That is so good.
Know.
That's money right there.
I don't know.
No, because you said, I'm willing to do the hard because I'm worthy of what's on the other side. I'm worthy
of that version of myself.
See, I could say what you said.
You can.
Because it sticks with me already.
But that's a lot of times why people can turn away from challenge or can turn away from hard and I use this all the time. I think it's applicable in fitness, and I think it's applicable when someone's in a room on a cycle bike and they're doing something really hard. It's that you are worthy of that version of yourself that's on the other side of hard work. You are worthy of that version of yourself that is on the other side of hard. I want her. Like, I want to be her. I want to be her so desperately. I want to be her. So sometimes when I'm going through really, really hard times, I realized that something bigger is happening. And I'm like, all right, get me right, get me ready for where I'm going, and understanding and realizing that's the only way for me. Everyone's different, but that is what is needed for me to get to where I'm going. And so I'm willing to take the ride.
Well, I know you think I'm hard on you.
You are.
But you see, now I know that a part of my role is to help you to get to the person on the other side of hard.
Yeah.
That's good.
It is.
I know that you faced some real challenges in your life.
Yeah.
You were married when you were young, and you went through a divorce.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, when they face a devastating moment like that in their life, because you said something that you're worthy of the person on the other side of hard. I think when you go through something like a divorce when you're young, a voice can seep into your soul that says you're not worthy of love, or you're not worthy of someone who'll be committed to you the rest of your life. You're not worthy of a future.
That's right.
How did you work your way through that time in your life?
It took me a while.
Because you were so young.
I was so young. I was so young. I mean, that was over 20 years ago now in my life. And it took me a long time. I was so ashamed. I was so embarrassed. You know, again, my parents were high school sweethearts, and I was just so, you know, and at that time my dad was managing the Chicago White Sox, and this person that I was married to was in my dad's industry as well. And so I felt like it was like world news. It wasn't, but you just feel like that is.
Sure, you feel like everyone knows.
You feel like everyone knows. And I was so embarrassed, and I was so ashamed, and I felt like such a failure. And I did. I felt so unworthy of love, and I didn't want to live. You know, I battled even wanting to live. Like it crushed me. It crushed my self-esteem. And it took me a while to fight out of that. And I was living in Chicago. I moved into my parents' basement to heal and to go through this divorce and to kind of pick my life back up and figure out my next steps. And I remember I was in the basement, and I was just like watching junk TV and just like doing nothing with my life. And I was just laying there depressed and felt really hopeless. And my dad, I think my brother, came down to the basement and said, "Dad wants you upstairs." And so I go upstairs, and it was my mom, my dad, and my 3 siblings, Jerry, Anthony, and Natalie. And it was like this intervention. And they were like, "You can't go on like this. You can't continue like this." And my dad says to me, and I'll never forget it, my dad says to me, "You've got to run to your healing. It's time for you to get up and run to your healing." I'd given up running track and field. I'd retired. I'd hung up my spikes. I was like, no more, never again. And it wasn't until that moment that I decided to run again. And that's when I even made it to the Olympic trials, and all of that stuff even started to happen for me and open up for me.
Wow.
And also part of me not making the Olympics and understanding the win, because the win also for me was my healing. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
The win for me was also my healing. And so I just had a proper perspective around it all. Like I won. I got me back. I got my life back. I got my confidence back.
The healing was the win.
The healing was the win.
And I happen to know this about you. While you're working through the Olympic trials and coming within, what, a second?
Coming within hundredths of a second.
A hundredth of a second of going to the Olympics, representing the United States of America.
Right.
And at the same time, you met someone named Jerome.
That's right.
Who was also an Olympic hopeful as a sprinter as well.
That's right.
So both of you are sprinters.
That's right.
And he also missed qualifying by...
Same thing. Barely anything.
A blink of an eye.
It's nothing. It's nothing.
And so 2 blinks of an eye changed both of your destinies.
That's right.
But
brought us together.
But brought you together.
That's right. Because it was in that heartache, and it was in that we found a connection and a love for each other. True story, we met at my aunt's funeral.
What?
Yeah. We met at my aunt's funeral. My dad's sister was at USC. She was in the basketball department. Her and Jerome were so close. Jerome would go up to her office right before track practice every day, and they became really close, and they started going to church together and hanging out. And she said to him one day, she was like, I think you're going to be in my family one day. We had never met.
Wow.
And she tried to get us to meet. She tried to get us to, and she knew I was going through this divorce, and she's like, I want someone to encourage you in track, because she knew I'd given up running track. She's like, I want you to meet this guy. I want him to encourage you in running. And I was like, I'm not interested. And we met at her funeral. And then we did start to encourage each other in track. And then not that many months later was the Olympic trials, where we both didn't make it. We met in January, and then the Olympic trials were that summer. And then that was when our relationship really started.
And you won so much more than you would have ever won by getting a gold medal in the Olympic Games.
That's right.
And Jerome is way more valuable than a gold.
That's right. He sure is.
He is a gold.
That's right. He is.
And well, it's incredible. I mean, how many people think that when they miss out on something, or they lose something, or even putting it into like a faith context, they feel like God didn't come through for them.
Yeah.
And they don't realize that maybe this is God redesigning your life, setting the sails in a different direction, so that to navigate to the future He wants for you, because that's your best future.
That's right. And that's why I honestly choose to believe that life doesn't happen to me but for me. I believe that my God is that good. And I wouldn't have been able to say that not making the Olympics would have set me up to have this relationship, this lifelong marriage and relationship to Jerome. But I honestly, anytime my heart is broken, I trust that God is that good, that there's something that will come out of it that was for me.
Now, I know that you had another leap. You ended up really, in many ways, becoming known across the entire country when you worked with SoulCycle for about 8 years.
Yeah.
But that came out of a time of depression in your life.
Yeah.
Talk to us a little bit about that. How did that all come together?
So the divorce was the first big heartache, depression, really dark season in my life. And, all of this gloriousness happens after that, as we just talked about. And then once Jerome and I got married and started to have babies, I suffered postpartum depression, really, really bad depression, unlike anything I'd ever experienced before. And it was in that state of depression and in that place of just, the depression was so physical for me. I don't know if you've ever dealt with depression, but it felt physical to me. And it was this one day in particular where Jerome left the house in the morning, and then he came home hours and hours and hours later, and I was still like in the same position on the couch. And it was just this really dark time in my life. And he comes home and he says, look, I just met this lady down the street. She has a yoga and spin studio. I just talked to her. She's looking forward to meeting you later today. He said, it's time to get up. He said, the world is waiting on you. God has created you to be an encourager. And it was like in that moment, like he began to just speak not to me, but almost to the gift and the call on my life. And there was something about the way he said it, when he said it, how he said it, that allowed me the strength to get up off the couch and make it to that spin and yoga studio. And that was the very first time I'd ever taken a spin class. And immediately fell in love with it, bought a 5-pack. And before the 5-pack was over, the owner was asking if I would become a teacher. And I went through teacher training.
I'm going to assume a 5-pack is 5 sessions in a row.
That's all. Exactly.
And so you just jumped in as a learner.
Yeah.
And quickly became a teacher.
That's right. I loved it. It just did something for me. I was just like, I love this. And then I started teaching, and in that space, I realized, whoa, this stationary bike that goes nowhere is one of the greatest vehicles to take us so far. And I just started to use that space and that platform in a completely different way.
But it goes back to what you said earlier about the power of visualizing.
That's right.
You realized even though the bike wasn't going anywhere, you could take them somewhere.
Yeah.
And that journey that you could take people on could change their lives.
Yeah.
Which is what you became known for all over Los Angeles at first and all over the country. And I went and sat in on one of your classes and it almost killed me. And but it was, yeah, I guess I'm allowed to say this, 60 bikes in there, and it was jam-packed with celebrities. I mean, it seemed like you were the voice that spoke into so many of Hollywood's most powerful, most creative personalities. And I don't think they were there just to get healthy, because some of them didn't look, they were going that fast that you would be yelling at them.
Yeah.
And they were like me. So I'm gonna make a confession. You know how when you'd say, turn it up,
yeah.
Turn it up, turn it up.
How was your integrity level in that moment?
It was really low.
It was low?
It was really low.
Yeah.
Because like I started turning it up and I realized she doesn't really want what's about to happen.
I do not want to pick you up off the ground. Yeah. You are correct.
Yeah. And I know you're trying to be careful with me. You put my bike by the door.
I did. I took all the proper precautions.
Yeah. You didn't have a medic there though.
Nope.
And it's really embarrassing when you see, a room mostly filled with women.
Yeah.
Who could just bike
crush
me
it
into the ground.
Right, crushing it.
Yeah. And the girl next to me is trying to encourage me and say,
sure.
It's okay. And she's trying to help me. I know.
Yeah.
And I felt so sad.
Yeah.
But what I noticed is, aside from the fact I did try to do the best I could.
I believe you.
But you were just speaking life into every single person in the room. And you have this natural gift of, you don't speak at people, you speak into people. And I wanted to give you my best. Like I wanted to be more. And I was going through this visceral experience where it wasn't just that I wanted to be healthy or get in shape. It was like I wanted to care more. I wanted to believe more. I wanted to do more. I wanted to accomplish more. And it went so far beyond what that hour of cycling was about.
That's right.
Where did that come from? How did that happen? Was it from the first day you taught, or did it kind of come, or did you have an epiphany one day? What took you to that place?
So I remember teaching and being in that space, and now I understand it more as coaching, not being so much of an instructor, giving cues like 1, 2, 3, 4, but being a coach is the ability to reach in and grab someone's greatness and say, here it is. Now you go get this. And I remember being in the environment, like these words would want to come out that I felt like were so inappropriate for the space, like this different level of encouragement, this where all of a sudden it felt like there was like depth and meaning and principle, and it felt like the things that I was being led to say I had never heard in that space. So the first couple times it happened, I would just like push it down.
Did you feel like you were breaking a rule, or just doing something
I just
that
felt
wasn't
like it was
right,
like I was like, no one's coming here to hear that. Like no one's here for that. Like, what are you thinking, Angela? No. And then when I wouldn't say the thing that I felt led to say, I remember the feeling that tormented me for the rest of the day when I didn't do the thing. And what began to happen was it began to outweigh what someone would think if I said the thing. if I went there. Like I began to not even care because I knew I couldn't live with the weight of that heaviness and torment of not doing the thing that I was being led to do.
You know what the thing was, right?
Yeah, of course.
That thing was your genius. You see, what was happening was that your genius was demanding to be expressed. And then that other voice was telling you, no, be average. Be like everyone else. Be what people expect. Be normal. Do what everyone else does. And I think that it's one of the reasons why so many people never step into their genius, is that there's this voice that's calling them to the uniqueness of who they are. But they've never seen anybody do that before.
Well, I just think it's Jesus. I just think it's God. I just think I just feel like one of the things that I always say is that we were all created in purpose, on purpose, for a purpose. And part of my purpose and part of the reason why I'm here is to encourage people to live the life they were called, created, and intended to live. And I feel like that was a moment for me where I chose purpose, where I chose to do the thing that I was sent here to do.
That's right. Yeah, I too believe it's Jesus that calls it out of you, but it's still the genius that's inside of you. And because that's one of the things that I think both of us know and believe so deeply, is that we're all created in the image of God.
Yeah.
And that God has placed extraordinary things in us.
That's right.
And I think it's so tragic when people live and die and never have that awakened.
That's right.
In their life.
Yeah.
And
I hate the thought of that for people too.
Yeah.
Like that's part of my passion when I'm in a room full of people coaching them, is just battling for that not to ever happen. Battling for them not to live another moment and not know.
Yeah.
And not get it.
Yeah. And by the way, that's why I wrote The Genius of Jesus. It's that I'm so convinced that, one, that Jesus is the greatest genius who ever lived,
That's right.
but that he awakens the genius in every person.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know this, but the word genius actually comes from the Greek, where the word genius comes from genie. And so the Greeks believed that genius was like a genie that was given to you by the gods. And so when a person displayed genius, they were touched by the gods. And so later then the concept of genius was adopted. But there's always been this sense of all human genius is a touch of the divine. And so the moment you begin to live out your genius, you're actually living out the intention that God created you to live.
Wow.
And until we find that intention, that genius oftentimes remains dormant in us.
Wow, that's deep.
But I love the fact that you're just a powerful reminder that the real purpose of all genius is not for the person who carries it, but for those who benefit from it.
That's right.
And I think that's the difference between someone who's narcissistic, someone who thinks, oh, I'm talented, that talent's for me, or
That's
I'm
right.
gifted, or I'm brilliant and it's for me. And whatever genius you've been given, it's actually so that you can serve the world
That's
with
right.
that genius.
That's right.
And so now you're at Soul Cycle for quite a few years, and you did this movie with Amy Schumer.
Oh yeah, I Feel Pretty.
I Feel Pretty.
Yeah.
And you were coaching her.
That's right. And she fell off the bike like you may have done if you actually added the resistance on.
So just on a little parenthetical note, what was that like?
It was so fun. It was so fun. I was so nervous to do it because I didn't want to be. I take my life's work so seriously that I was like, I don't want this to be made as a joke. I don't know if I'm going to do it. And Jerome was like, girl, quit playing. Like, you should do this. And then my friends who were, taking my class for years, Mark Silverstein was one of the writers and creators. And then Busy Phillips, his wife, was one of the actresses in the movie. And they were like, you have to do this. Like, this is you. Like, we basically, got the idea of this character, or, you've inspired so much of this. You have to do this. This is you.
No one else could have done that. I'm sorry. No one in the world could have done that but you.
So fun. It was so fun. So I did it, and it was great. And what I realized, which I don't think I knew before then, like, even though I coached so many actors and actresses and so many creatives and so many people in that space, is what it takes to be a genius in that field. And in that is just, I was so blown away by my friends and their work ethic and how hard it was and all that it took to actually make a movie and bring it to life. I was actually blown away by that.
Yeah, people don't realize it takes so much work to make something look natural.
Yeah.
And to make it look easy.
That's right.
And and that's one of the interesting things about genius. When someone actually expresses a level of genius, it looks like it's effortless.
Yeah.
And other people think, oh, I could do that.
That's right.
Until you try it, and
That's
then
right.
it's really, really hard.
That's right.
So you were at SoulCycle, and one of the things that really struck me was that you had some people who were actually really famous atheists in the room, and you spent an hour speaking faith into them. And they would never go to church in a million years.
Yeah.
But they would show up faithfully to your class.
Yeah.
And you were at Mosaic on Sunday, and I was over at SoulCycle, and I'm like, you're doing in that context what Jesus would be doing. I'm just going to say it like that. That you were actually speaking life and faith, and you were calling people out to be their best selves. And there's almost like, I would say, two extreme approaches to helping a person find their need for God to really find Jesus. One is to try to fill that person with guilt and shame and make them feel so bad that finally they just break down and go, okay, God, I'm desperate, I need you. But another way of doing it is you call people to their highest, greatest self. And when they're trying to achieve their highest self, they realize, I need God because my highest ideals are beyond my capacity.
There it is.
And I think one of the things that we really resonate and I think share together is call people to their highest self and let them discover that they're created for a relationship with God.
That's right.
And that becomes such a beautiful thing.
That's right.
So you're at the peak. I mean, you're doing movies because of what you're doing at SoulCycle. You are coaching because that's what you're doing. And one of the great definitions I heard is that a mentor gives you the best of themselves, but a coach pulls the best out of you.
I love that.
And that's exactly why you are a coach, because you do pull greatness out of people.
Thank you.
And that is your greatness. But then you did a crazy thing. You quit. you leave.
Left.
You leave SoulCycle.
Got up and left.
At the peak of your popularity,
Got
of your influence, and you start a new company called Army.
That's right.
Talk to us a little bit about the challenges there, and what are some of the new competencies you've had to learn? What are some of the things that you've maybe stepped in and thought, wow, this is a new challenge. This is something I've never seen before, something I have to pull different things out of myself that I didn't have to pull out before.
Yeah, first of all, I would say to anybody that is considering taking a huge leap or taking a huge risk or betting on themselves, you get to this point where you can't not jump. You get to this point where you can't not go. It's the same as that feeling that I felt when I was like, I'm just going to say the thing because I can't live with how it feels to not say the thing. It gets to that same point where you're like, I'm just going to jump, and if it's a but, I don't know what it's going to be, but all I know is I can't stay. I know that. And so jumped, took the risk, bet on myself, was really at a place where I knew I'd earned the right to grow, and I had hit a ceiling in growth. I had done that. And
You earned the right to grow.
I had earned the right to grow.
I love that. Because you would not settle for the ceiling.
No way.
That had been given you.
No way.
I think a lot of times we have aspirations and desires, but we settle for the ceiling that's given us.
That's right.
And I think it's
and it
so
was
important.
a cute ceiling.
Yeah.
It was a cute
ceiling.
ceiling.
It was a nice ceiling.
Trust me.
It's a ceiling other people wanted.
It's true.
But I do think what you said about you bet on yourself.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times people don't realize that starting something like Army, starting something from scratch, starting your own business, or
I got that from Jay-Z and Emory Jones. They would always say, bet on yourself, bet on yourself.
I just love the fact that you can quote Jay-Z because you actually had a conversation with him.
But that is, for Rock Nation, that is one of their slogans, like, bet on yourself. And they would always tell me that, like, bet on yourself.
So you bet on yourself.
I bet on myself.
So what happened?
Started Army with my partners, Trey and Akin, and opened up the LA location in January of 2020. And, you know,
right before
March,
the pandemic.
by March of 2020, we are in a global pandemic.
Mm-hmm. Good timing.
Genius timing that was.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's and that had so many challenges.
So many challenges.
Because you had to go from a physical space that you worked so hard to curate to now everything has to go virtual.
Yeah.
And I know even in that space, it was so difficult that at first everyone's flooding the internet.
Yeah.
And so you're competing with all these businesses that are panicking, and it felt like a frenzy.
I remember I called you during the beginning of it because what we decided at Army, we shut our doors on a Friday, and by Saturday, we were on Instagram giving free practices on Instagram Live, and we did that for 150 days straight.
I remember that you basically gave yourselves away for 150 days.
150 days straight. From the East Coast to the West Coast, we had programmed, we had a whole schedule, 7 days a week, we're giving it away. And we just figured in this most crazy time of our lifetime, we are still gonna show up and be of service. And we're gonna figure out a way to do that, and we did. But I remember calling you because I was like, at the same time, you're showing up and you're being of service and you're doing the thing, but at the same time, you're also going through a global pandemic, and you're also, you know, a mom with, you know, trying to keep your kids safe, and you're also, you know, and there was everything going on with the social and, you know, all of the racial, and there was so much going on. And I remember calling you and I was like, it's so loud. Everything's so loud. I remember saying, like, I feel like, am I showing up too much? Like, there was so much noise. Like, everyone was on live, and everyone was, and it was just like, and at the same time, I needed to turn in and kind of get what I was supposed to get out of the whole world shutting down as well, and take care of my kids and my family. And I remember that time it was a very interesting time to try and navigate.
Yeah, and also when you give something away for 150 days, people forget that what you're giving actually costs something.
That's right.
And then when it's time then to ask people to actually pay for value, it's like, wait a minute, you've been giving us this for free.
Yeah.
So you had to navigate so many different issues in starting a new business and creating something new. And I know you guys have your New York location and you have your LA, you know, presence. And if you were just kind of looking at this whole process in the middle of all the pandemic, if you learned 2 or 3 things out of starting your business that you would want to share with someone who's thinking about starting something new, what would they be?
They would be to listen to your instincts. They would be to take a beat when you need to take a beat and strategize. Because I think there's a moment for instinct, and I think there's a moment for strategy. And I think when you're trying to be instinctual, but you needed to be strategic, I think there's times for certain things. Right. And there were moments when we were instinctual, just kind of going and doing as we felt led to do. But then there was a time where you need to kind of take a beat and be strategic.
That's so good. That's right.
You know? Yeah,
and it seemed like most of the time that you called me was when it was your beat to be strategic.
Exactly.
You can have those conversations, and which I think you do. You have a way of trusting yourself and getting counsel.
Yeah.
And I think that great leaders have that tension, or they have that ebb and flow between you trust yourself, but you also get good input from other people as you go forward.
Thank you.
You know, I just want to go through a couple of questions real quick, and just for fun. Okay. And we'll make these maybe kind of quick.
Okay.
All right.
We'll go quick.
So we'll do this as a speed Q&A. How is genius expressed through fitness?
Creativity.
Ooh, unwrap that just a little bit.
I mean, I think for me, on a cycle bike, I think my partner, Akin, is one of the greatest genius in our space. And I think it is finding different ways to move and groove and vibe on this stationary bike, or finding ways to move and groove where you're actually doing some sort of work to close the gap between where you are and where you're called to be. And it doesn't have to look the same. There's so many different ways. So I think creativity, innovation.
That's so good. I know one of the statements that you make quite often is the way you do one thing is the way you do everything. Yeah. So that leads into this question. How has physical discipline shaped your personal life?
For me, first of all, if I can just give, I always love when I have the opportunity to share my perspective on physical fitness. I truly believe that every single one of us is born with these certain gifts that are unique to us, and our body is what houses the gift. And really, for me, the whole point of physicality is us getting strong enough in our body to do the thing that we were called, created, and intended to do. And so for me, physicality and being fit is everything. It's our ability to live our fullest and our greatest and our highest expression. I don't even know if I answered your question.
No, that is so good. I know you're a Nike spokesperson.
Yeah.
And when I walked into the Nike center, and it has on the wall, if you have a body, you're an athlete. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I oftentimes just try to remind people is that statement is both true and not true. Mm-hmm. It's true that if you have a body, you're an athlete. You can be athletic, you can be healthy. But if you have a body, you're not an Olympian.
That's right.
And so it's really important to understand there's a spectrum. And so people who are the best in the world inspire us, who maybe in that particular space are just average. And it's the same way with genius. Is that what I say is that everyone has genius within them. Not everyone's Picasso. Mm-hmm. Not everyone's Einstein, right? Not everyone's Jay-Z. But everyone has genius within them.
Yeah.
And I'm just kind of curious, are there some geniuses in history that have inspired you?
I mean, I think we've talked about Jay-Z a couple times. I think he is just an extraordinary man, and he inspires me. And I feel privileged to know him and to see his kindness and tenderness and to know his wisdom and his depth. And his level of creativity and brilliance and genius. So, he's just super dope and someone that I truly, look up to. I think there's a lot of people that I am.
Who's your favorite athlete in the world? Ancient or present?
Ancient or present.
Like anywhere in history.
I loved FloJo. Florence Griffith Joyner.
Yeah, of course.
Florence Griffith. I mean, when I graduated high school and they did the whole speech, the valedictorian did the whole speech, I think there was like a thing about, maybe it was me in the Olympics, not necessarily me and FloJo, but she was always like my idol.
I could see that.
FloJo.
That's so good.
Yeah.
All right, here's a good one for people listening. What is the biggest lie people believe about themselves? And what is the most important truth you want to impart to those people you train and to even those who are listening?
Yeah. I think
What's the biggest lie?
I can't. You hear so much, I can't, before people even try. That blows my mind. I can't. I can't, but you didn't try. I can't. How many times does I can't stop us from even trying? And what I believe is there's an ingredient in your try that'll take you to the next level.
So everyone who's listening right now who would say, I can't.
Try.
What would you tell them?
Try. Put something on it. Put something on it. Like, you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be the Olympian. You don't have to be the Picasso, but try. Try. It's good to not be good at something.
Oh, that's good.
It's so good not to be good in something.
Well, then I'm living a really good life because I do so
but
many
it's good to
things I'm
put
not good
yourself
at.
in that.
Yeah, it's so true.
It grows you and it stretches you and it expands your territory.
Yeah.
That's okay. Just try.
That is so good. I love that. I think you kind of answered this question, but it says, what is the number one reason people don't step into their personal genius? I have a feeling you're going to say they don't try.
That's what it is. That's what it is.
And
they believe they can't. They listen to the lie, I can't. They listen to the lie, I can't. And they push it down, push it down, push it down, push it down. They push it down. And we all are faced with that. And my prayer is that more of us just, can you imagine this world if we all did the thing?
Yeah.
How dope would this place be?
Yeah, I want to go into a room we haven't gone into, just for a minute or two.
Okay.
In the middle of the quarantine, the pandemic, we all experienced the protests with the death of George Floyd, the tragedies with Breonna Taylor, the Black Lives Matter movement. We talked during that time.
We did.
It was devastating.
Yeah.
As a mom, you have two boys and you have a
two
tall,
black sons.
really handsome husband.
That's right.
And the level of concern for you is probably heightened far beyond what other people who are not people of color could really maybe fully comprehend.
That's right.
You have an amazing ability to connect with people of any ethnicity, any background, any race, any color, any economic status. I just want you to take a moment and talk to me about that. How did that happen? How did you become that kind of person? And maybe just share with us some of your thoughts and feelings about how can we as a people move toward less division, a culture of respect and acceptance. And I know this is an issue that's been really important to you.
It is. And I don't know that I have the answer. I think for me, growing up and going to a white school during the week, living in a white neighborhood, but going to a black church midweek and on Sunday, and growing up in a household where my dad's playing Martin Luther King tapes throughout the house, where our home is filled with, black art, and we had this huge, pride and love for our history and where we came from, but a grandma who is half Cherokee Indian and half black, who doesn't have but a 5th grade education, who ended up, who worked for a white family, who picked cotton, another grandma who could pass for white, who's Creole. And I think there was a lot around me. And I think being cultured and traveled, because of what my dad did and having that privilege to be a citizen of the world and travel to different places. I think being a lover of Jesus and really understanding that we are all children of God, that God was not having a bad day when he made any of us, and really working to love people and really working to love humanity, that there's just, I do love people and I do love humanity. But what I saw this past summer was just something that was bold and in our face. And for a lot of people, it seemed brand new, but this has been going on. This has been the story. My brothers have all, been pulled over and handcuffed, and my husband, we live in Beverly Hills. I can't tell you the amount of times we've been pulled over just a mile from our house in Beverly Hills. Like, The racial tension is real.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of good people who just live in a different context who can't really believe this is
real.
This is real.
This is real.
Yeah.
It's been going on.
And I think it's so important to talk about it and tell the people, no, this isn't just looking back on the past. This is not an unwillingness to let go of history.
No.
We're
just catching it on tape now.
Yeah.
And now more people are seeing it and more people are exposed to it. But this has been what it is from the beginning of time, when Africans were brought over here, when Black people were brought over here on slave ships and built, so much of this country. This has been what it is, And so I just want to continue to fight the good fight in any way that I can. I want to continue to be an activist for justice in any way that I can. And I think part of fighting for people's genius is part of the solution, because when we do show up in our highest expression, we're not racist.
That's right.
We're not that.
Mm-hmm.
We're not that. So I'm going to continue to fight for people. I'm going to continue to do my part to shed light. I feel as long as I'm on this earth occupying space, that I'm going to continue to do my part to push humanity forward and encourage others to do the same.
That is so good. And I think it's so hard to conceptualize that you can live in Beverly Hills and still experience being almost profiled.
Absolutely.
And I just think it's important, and because a part of your genius I've seen is the way that you stand in the middle of so many people and you bring people together. And I never think about how divided the world is when we're together.
I know.
It's to me it's tragic, because if they could just experience what we all experience as friends,
yeah,
they would long for the way the world is for us. And yet every day you have to face the realities of that. And Edward and Lorenzo will have to face the realities of that. And
they do. And I'll make sure they're prepared. I will make sure that my Black sons are prepared for this world that we live in.
Yeah. And it doesn't mean that everyone's like that. It just means that there are enough people like that.
That's right.
That you have to deal with it as real life.
That's right. That's right.
And,
That's right.
And yet somehow your dad elevated, and his family elevated, and you keep elevating, and your sons will elevate. And I think one of the powerful things about it is that even with all the challenges that are out there, even with the inequities in the world, sis, you've just been unstoppable.
Oh, I love you.
No, and it's
Thank
such a
you.
beautiful thing. I want to leave everyone with just, I want to give them a cheat, because right now they're all on their stationary bikes.
Yeah.
Right now they're all just hustling. You're telling them to turn up the knob.
Ugh.
You're telling them to sweat it out. You're telling them that how you do one thing is how you do everything.
Right. Come on.
And you're
Let's
pushing.
go.
So can you just kind of give us just a little bit of your genius, and just speak into everyone's life right now and call out the genius within them?
Okay, so first of all, I can't believe you're doing this to me. But first of all, I need you to know, and like I said earlier, every single one of you were created in purpose, on purpose, for a purpose. It is in you. You have the ability to be all that you were called, created, and destined to be. It is downloaded in your DNA, and there is not one challenge that you will face that you cannot overcome. There is not one obstacle that you will face that you cannot overcome. And you are worthy of the version of yourself that is on the other side of hard work. So go ahead and do the thing. Go ahead and try. Go ahead and put a demand on your potential. Go ahead and close the gap between where you are and where you are called, created, and intended to be. You are loved. You were created in love. Go and be love, and go and be the highest and best version of yourself. I love you.
The genius of Angela Manuel Davis. Angela, I love you, sis.
I love you.
It's so good to have you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me today. It is so exciting week after week to experience the incredible journey of so many individuals who have discovered their own genius. I want to encourage you, if you want to learn more about Angela, experience her training sessions, to go to army.com and sign up for one of the sessions right now. I also want to encourage you to pick up my new book, The Genius of Jesus, available everywhere books are sold. And if you're watching on YouTube, would you just take a moment, leave a comment, maybe share with us something you picked up, you learned along the way, and recommend guests that we can have in the future. I want to thank you so much, and I just want to encourage you to join me next week as we continue The Genius of.